I don't know if the prosecutor says something stupid, can the defense object, Your Honor, that's, stupid. You know what I mean? To be fair, though,
I think so.
If the prosecutor says something nonsensical, I'm pretty sure the defense can say objection, false statement or something like that. I don't know. Because my favorite moment in the entire trial, and you guys as gun guys are going to love it, when he said hollow points are designed to enter the target and explode inside. And Kyle just furls his brow I don't think that's right. And the judge goes, do you mean expand? They don't explode. The prosecutor was saying nonsense. He actually, the prosecution made the argument that because Kyle Rittenhouse was using Full Metal Jacket, he was trying to shoot through people.
Sure.
Because Full Metal Jacket's designed to go through. And I'm like, where was the defense to cross and say, that's not true?
Right.
But the problem was Kyle's not an expert.
They
didn't have a firearms expert.
The bullet exploding, I think, what happens? It goes in and then the pressure causes it to expand.
Hollow point bullets usually have a hollow cavity in the front of the nose, why it's called a hollow point. And what happens when it hits a soft target, they peel back and they become larger. Because, especially with handguns, you have to understand, we use these terms switches and timers. Okay, so if I shoot you with a handgun, I could shoot you, say, in center mass in the face or in the chest, and that's what we would call a switch, right? Instant, like Anthony Huber. Okay, he got shot, and 2 seconds afterward he dropped to the ground. Why? Because he got hit right in the aorta. Instant loss of blood pressure, and you're dead before you hit the floor. Same thing if you get hit in the brain, something like that, right? We call the brain box. Timers are, if I shoot you 3 times in your lower abdomen, well, you may bleed out, but that might take 5 or 10 minutes. And in that 5 or 10 minutes, you can still kill me during that time period. So with pistol ammunition in particular, because it has a lot less velocity than rifle ammunition, you want the hole to be as large as possible so that they bleed out as quickly as possible. Rifle ammunition has some other wounding characteristics, which doesn't require it to be as large per se. But the funny thing is 55 grain Full Metal Jacket ammo, which is what he was using, that's what the military originally specified in the original M16 rifle, and they chose that specifically because at velocities over approximately 2,600 feet per second, which it would have been at coming out of the barrel of his rifle, they are designed to tumble and fragment very reliably. So could they have passed through Rosenbaum? Potentially, but they didn't pass through Huber, because there was no exit wound on him. They worked exactly as designed. So this idea that Full Metal Jacket is always designed to pass through somebody is a total misnomer. And
that to me was insane.
I can't believe that they didn't have a ballistics expert up there to explain these things.
The defense screwed that up. The prosecution, I believe he said what did he say it was designed to go through,
pass through?
Yeah, and the judge called it a steel jacketed round.
Jacket, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's copper jacket, right?
And I was just like, you're right. The defense didn't have a firearms expert. That's insane to me, because Kyle Rittenhouse could have said in that line of questioning, where they could have brought up an expert, and he could have said, the use of hollow point rounds suggests intent to cause more bodily harm.
Sure.
In fact, by Kyle Rittenhouse using a Full Metal Jacket, which is much more of a standard basic round for this rifle, it stands to reason if the round passed through, it would cause less damage and be less likely to kill. They could have had someone testify that.
You could argue that 6 ways from Sunday, though, because if I let's just now you have the issue. I use a Full Metal Jacket round that is not as effective when in impacting soft tissue, at creating a larger wound cavity. So a Full Metal Jacket round is more likely to pass through. Therefore, I was not interested in killing them, only seriously maiming them. Yeah. I mean,
that's the murder charge.
It is still a murder charge, but you attempted murder.
No. I mean so. There's risk there, right? What he was trying to say is that if you were preparing for overpenetration, you were being reckless. But the argument could have been, the prosecution suggesting someone else should use hollow points. Hollow points more likely to cause, tissue damage, and more likely to kill.
I mean, if Binger's a prosecuting attorney, he should be disbarred for this level of incompetence.
The point is, he was being Rittenhouse is charged with intentional homicide. Mm-hmm. If he said, it's a standard round. It's very basic. It doesn't have any kind of added characteristics.
We're going through an ammo shortage.
Right. The jacket is simply so that it doesn't put lead deposits in the rifle.
In the barrel, right.
In the barrel. It's basically just to keep it clean. And, I thought to myself, if I use hollow point or any kind of polymer tip or specialized round, that might actually hurt people more. And I don't want anyone to get seriously hurt. I just want to stop the threat against me.
Sure.
That would call into question the homicide charge. He can try and say, well, you're being reckless then. And I'd say, well, actually, like you mentioned, the 223s will tumble around inside, but not expand. So I was actually hoping that, or I wouldn't say the word hoping, but I was scared in the event if I used a more serious round, I would take someone's life. And I figured to myself, I don't want to do that, so I wouldn't.
Yeah, and people think that this is just gun people like being pedantic with terminology. We hear that a lot from anti-gun people in particular. Oh, you guys are so caught up in terminology, rifle, pistol, short barrel, etc. And my answer to that is always a couple things. First of all, this is like a common issue that we have to talk about with ammunition in particular. There are people who that's like a myth you see on the internet. Oh, if you're a home reloader and you make your own ammo and it's higher power than what you would buy off the shelf, if you use that in a self-defense situation, they're going to use that against you and try to paint you as some kind of killer. So you should only use. I hear this from a lot of firearms instructors that you should call your local police department, find out what your local police officers carry, which are almost always going to be a hollow point of some variety, and that's what you should use, because then if you get up in court, you can say, hey, I shot the guy with the same thing that the Novi police or the whatever police department uses, so I'm in the clear.
Did you guys see Gage Grosskreutz say that 223 is a large caliber rifle round?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's just
it's
nonsense.
A firearms expert to be like, that's not true.
Not true. Right.
It's actually on the smaller end.
Yeah,
right.
Sure, yeah.
And lower chamber pressure.
Chamber pressure is on par, but in terms of the diameter of the bullet, and the muzzle energy compared to say like .308 Winchester or 30-06, which we were fielding in World War II. I mean that you're talking about almost double the muzzle energy.
Could you imagine Kyle walking around with like a Barrett M82?
Yeah. I mean, he'd be ripped.
right now.
Right, he'd be huge.
When we went to the range, Forrest actually held it up.
It's not an easy gun to
wield. No. What is it, like 70 pounds? And you're trying to like...
It's, not 70.
Yeah, it's 40.
It's a heavy gun.
Yeah,
35,
it's in 50 pounds.
Without any optics, it's about 30. It's like, I think it was at 27.
How close towards you is the center of mass on that thing?
Not close. It's a heavy bullet.
It's a heavy
bullet.
The barrel, especially on large rifles, the barrel is very thick. So that's where the majority of the weight in a firearm is, because the barrel has to be able to withstand, especially like long barrel with a 50 BMG. If you look at those under a really high speed camera, 100,000 frames per second, you'll see the barrel wave. So they have to be very, very thick, and the steel's very heavy, so they're always very front heavy.
We should have actually grabbed some rounds to show. I wish we did. We don't have it. Like I literally because
I got some in my car.
We have the 50 BMG.
Yeah. So
like
no,
this
is the misnomer. So you'll see. Oh, by the way, these are available on our website. They're serialized. Let's go, Brandon. Phoenix Ammunition. Yes. So this is a 50 BMG cartridge case. But, the actual projectile itself, and again, with the terminology, like being that this is what I do for a living, I say projectile because, people will commonly refer to as the entire cartridge as a bullet. But really the bullet is only the thing that comes out. And so, like, I've seen ads from Moms Demand Action where you'll see them showing the whole cartridge like coming out of the end of the barrel. That's how stupid these people are.
There's a lot of movies.
I want to talk about something else too.
Can we first cover up the 5.56 223 question? Because
I
mean, because I think this is actually much more important. The going back to the Kyle Rittenhouse case, there are multiple things that are going on in this trial that the person who's on trial is actually the American family. Like you and I and every individual person. And the first example of the 5.56 question, or the 223, right? I'm not going to go down to the arguments on what's the difference between 5.56 and 223. For the remainder of this conversation, they're effectively the same thing. You're talking about years of change, and long story. The 223 round was designed to be shot out of a 16 or a 20 or 18, 16, 20-inch barrel, a longer barrel, so it can build up muzzle velocity. So the things that impact the effectiveness of that round are the load that is used, the projectile that is used, the rifling of the barrel, the length of the barrel. All of these factors go into play where you see where was it maybe 10 years ago, short-barreled rifles concepts became super popular. One of the reasons why the Mark 18 has a 10.3-inch barrel is because that's about as close as you can get before that bullet, that projectile, once fired, does not move fast enough to produce, what do they call it, hydrostatic?
Yeah, hydrostatic shock.
Hydrostatic shock,
wounding.
Yep. Terminal wounding. You're looking at like very, very detailed stories. So when somebody says that the AR-15 is a deadly, dangerous weapon of war, they are simultaneously being met by veterans overseas who complained
it wasn't deadly enough.
Using a 5.56 rifle with green tip rounds, armor piercing, language out the door, we're having issues because the guy was on drugs and would shrug it off back to timers and switches.
Yeah, that's why they made the 458 SOCOM, right?
That's one of the reasons. I mean, they've redesigned so one of the problems they had in Afghanistan in particular was they chopped. So again, the original M16 was designed around a 20-inch barrel, so you're getting 3,200 feet per second muzzle velocity. They chopped that down to 16 inches. And then when you're in Afghanistan, Iraq, you're clearing these very small buildings. They needed to be able to maneuver around corners, so they chopped the barrels down even further. So now muzzle velocity, you're only getting about 2,600 feet per second, and that's right on the line where that bullet is going to not tumble but just pass straight through a target. And so they started to redesign. They went up to a 77 grain round, made the bullet heavier, so that it would tumble a little bit faster. They increased the twist rate on the barrel. They started to play around with, now they have a new version, the M855A1. It's got a steel tip at the end, so it helps it to pass through particular barriers. And all these things were tested on what we saw in Afghanistan, in the global war on terror, as they cut the barrels down. And they saw, 5.56 got a bad reputation for a little while because they were having a lot of pass-throughs. They had designed things to work against people with body armor. They weren't wearing body armor. They weren't tumbling. So they had, the military, unfortunately, is not very good at like redesigning the whole thing as a package. They cut the barrel down, they forget about the ammunition. They redesign the ammunition, they forget about the rifle, and it takes a long time to get all the way through.
I think one thing we're learning a lot about, which most of us probably already knew, if you're somebody who knows guns, and you guys infinitely more than the average person, you know all the different reasons for different bullets, all the different reasons for different barrel lengths and styles, handgun versus rifle, heavy barrel versus, etc. And what I've come to start, realizing is in the past few years when I've been buying guns and learning about them, when you look at this trial, it really exemplifies how the average urban Democrat type person thinks all that exists are AR-15s and bullets.
Yeah.
They don't realize that, like, you're talking about 223 and 5.56. They can both be fired out of 5.56, but a 5.56 can't be in a 223. Is correct, right?
Yeah.
Well, through a bolt action rifle, yes, especially because you should not. On a bolt action, the reason why that happens is because bolt action rifles that were chambered in 223 40 years ago cannot handle the chamber pressure of the 5.56.
And that is true of 7.62 and 308.
Well, there's a similar issue.
Similar.
It has a lot more. I mean, there are more nuances, but a major nuance of that is because of the years that those bolt action rifles were popular.
So
in 2021,
I go to a gun shop. I was buying an M1A, and there was an argument over whether or not you should load 308 in an M1A because it was designed for 7.62 and they're functionally identical rounds, but the higher chamber pressure could be bad. And some guy's telling me a story about how one gun he saw exploded, and everyone's like, that never happened. You're lying, and they're arguing about it. What the point I'm getting at is I got into an argument on Facebook with some guy who was like, why do you need an assault rifle or whatever? Yeah. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm not an expert, but I do know about the weapons I have and why I have them. And so I just explained why the different kind of rounds, why the different kind of shotgun shells or whatever, why the different kind of shotgun. And it's like some are better at close range, some are better at medium range. Yep. Some bullets do one thing or another. And the issue is that the world isn't rifle, handgun, and bullet.
Right.
Which is what most of these establishment gun control type people and the prosecutor in the Rittenhouse case seem to think. So I want to get into the perfect example of this. And we were talking about it before the show. One of the questions asked of the prosecutor was, in the moment when Gage Grosskreutz was pointing the gun at Kyle, the prosecutor said, "Why did you think he was a threat?" Rittenhouse says, "Because he was pointing a gun at me." And the prosecutor says, "He's got a gun in his hand, right?" "Yes. He could have shot you from 40, 50 feet away, but he didn't choose to. Why did you think that was a threat?" And Rittenhouse was just like, he was coming at me with a gun. And this is where I was like, they needed that firearms expert to say, in the heat of a moment, with someone like Gage Grosskreutz, who is not a firearms expert who's trained, the likelihood of him actually hitting a target from 50 feet away while running is slim to none.
In the dark.
In the dark.
Yeah.
Which would mean someone who he had a permit before, it was now invalid. He knows he won't hit the target, so he's closing the distance to guarantee hit the targets. In fact, that proves he was even more dangerous.
Right.
If he was trying to shoot from further away, because someone does fire at Kyle Rittenhouse after the fact. You hear the gunshots. Kyle just walks slowly away. Kyle was not threatened by the fact that other people had continued shooting after the fact, probably because he's like, they're nowhere near me. But the prosecutor got that question in, and there was no one to rebut it.
Well, I mean, it's also tragic because now that Gage is missing a part of his bicep, we're not going to be able to take him to a range and see his effectiveness at 40 meters.
You know, Gage Grosskreutz, I tweeted this out. I said, people keep cheering for this Kenosha guy who travels, super far to go to a riot, bringing a gun he's not legally allowed to possess. I don't care if he's claiming he wants to provide medical assistance or be an EMT or whatever. He should not have been there. I'm talking about Gage Grosskreutz, of course, not Kyle Rittenhouse. Which is, it's interesting that they keep saying he crossed state lines with an illegal gun. And I'm like, Gage Grosskreutz traveled 40 miles with an illegal gun. Not that I think guns should be illegal, but in this instance, like statute of law.
Well, and in Gage's, I mean, first of all, he's carrying a 40, so obviously doesn't know what he's doing.
He's on his way to an IDPA
40,
match.
like
40 caliber.
40 Smith & Wesson. That's an inside gun joke. Anyway...
Why nobody uses 40?
It's just kind of an overrated caliber. It had its time, and everybody kind of jumped on this bandwagon.
It's like the 80s cops, right?
It's a watered down 10 millimeter because the FBI basically invented 10 millimeter because there was a couple of bad shootouts they were involved in, so they wanted something really, really powerful, which 10 millimeter is. But then they found that their agents couldn't handle the recoil, so then they watered it down and created 40 Smith & Wesson, which is the same bullet, little bit shorter case, less powder. And so for a while it was more powerful than 9mm enough to warrant it, but these days with modern powder and bullet technology, the difference in recoil isn't worth the added penetration, the lower magazine capacity, the inability to put 2-3 rounds in the same hole, all those kinds of things. But what I was getting at with Gage is everybody in this country who concealed carries a gun on a daily basis knew that guy, I mean, he was a liar, obviously, but the minute that prosecutor said, so, you carry this gun every day, and he said, oh yeah, wallet, keys, gun, every day I leave the house the same way, and the prosecutor said, do you know if you had one in the chamber that night? And he said, I don't know. Okay, everybody knows, right? We can get into the debate about should you carry with one in the chamber or not. The answer is yes.
There is no debate.
There is no debate. Yeah. The answer is yes. I don't care about your Israeli training or whatever. The answer is yes. But the point is, even if you subscribe to the idea that you shouldn't carry one in the chamber, you at least everybody knows who is all serious about the fact that they conceal carry and having a gun. They know whether they have one in the chamber or not. Period.
When you pick the weapon up, you check.
Yeah.
When you hand the weapon to somebody else, you check. Then they check. Everybody checks. Everybody knows. And the other thing, too, is I remember watching this commercial for, like, workplace firearms mounting or whatever. And it was like, I got an ad on Facebook for it. And basically, all of it shows that when they're putting the gun in there, it's actually designed so that you push the gun with your hand to chamber around under your desk. Mm-hmm. Like, what's the point of having a weapon unready to be used? Someone kicks your door in and threatens your life. And you're like, give me a minute to, there we go. All right, we're good. Yeah. And it is funny too in the movies. They always
rack the slide.
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah.
And
always,
speaking of movies and checking your guns, we have Alec Baldwin.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, really, at this point in time, they should have called Alec Baldwin on the stage to be one of them, because he would have said, "Yeah, he knows what he's talking about. He's a famous Hollywood actor." Alec Baldwin was handed a firearm, pointed it at somebody, and pulled the trigger, believing that he was so holy of a person he didn't even have to check.
I'm sorry, you're incorrect.
Oh, okay.
You're incorrect.
What
year was the movie set to take place in? Do you know?
It's going to be 1984. It was like 1886.
1890s, I believe.
Okay.
1880s. Revolvers back then. Mm-hmm. Could you just pull the trigger?
Well, if they're single action only, no.
No. They were single action. My understanding is that it was a single action 45.
Yeah. Okay. The model that he used was a single action. That answers the question.
But think about what that means. Not only did he pull a gun and point it, he had to pull the hammer back before pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
So this is like look, people might think it's nitpicking, But this is literally him making a very deliberate action to be like, not only am I going to, because some might argue that he was just going like, aha, like thinking he had an empty, cleared cold gun or whatever. No, he pulled the hammer back. He was intending for it to go off.
Right.
Yeah, how that happens.
Well, that's why this
this
stuff is really important. As I was saying earlier about firearm terminology in particular, people on the other side think that we get too caught up in the details, but the details matter. I mean, if you're a gun owner, you almost have to be a paralegal in a sense, because you saw that in some of the jury instructions they were talking about with Rittenhouse, with the gun charge getting basically thrown out. The whole thing came down to, was he in possession of a short-barreled rifle or not? Well, if you ask your average person what is a short-barreled rifle, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you. But the difference is, a 1/16 of an inch. If it's 15.9 inches, you end up like Randy Weaver. If it's 16 inches, you don't. So, these things matter. This idea that like firearm laws are fast and loose is just nonsense. They've painted it to be that way, but you have to know, is the forward grip too, just a little bit too long? Well, now you've got an AOW. There's so much detail involved.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.